Strap in, kids, and grab your tinfoil hats, because believe me when I say that I think I have found the conspiracy theory to beat all conspiracy theories. Just kidding, I'm not actually going to be wearing this hat for this video. I just thought it would be funny to wear a tinfoil hat, because why not? And because the topic of this video kind of makes it seem relevant and it's funny, and I just wanted to make a tinfoil hat. So anyway, FYI, they make your head sweat like crazy, and it just makes me wonder, are they seeing aliens? Or are they pressure cooking their brains? So this video was originally going to be about something entirely different. This is what I had referenced back in my conspiracy theory video where I said that I had 2 pages of notes about something absolutely out of this world. Maybe not in those exact words, but that's essentially what I meant, and this is it. This video was originally going to be about the Freemasons, and most specifically the Order of the Eastern Star, which is the women's section of the Freemasons. And I guess it is relevant that I mention that because I never would have stumbled onto this if it weren't for that. I was having a conversation with Stuart and he asked if I'd ever heard of the Order of the Eastern Star, and I hadn't, so I looked into them, and they're kind of on the same level as the Freemasons. And fun fact, if you don't know and you weren't raised a Christian or a Catholic, Christians and Catholics in general are prohibited from being members of the Freemasons, and of course by proxy members of the Order of the Eastern Star. And that's for what I had always thought was the reason that there's some like occult weirdness with the Freemasons allegedly, and a lot of distrust about what they do in their lodges and temples. And some of what I read about the Order of the Eastern Star definitely did seem kind of sus. There was something about how the women will bow to this 5-pointed star, which they claim represents the star in the east mentioned in Matthew 2:2, where the Magi say, "We saw the star in the east and are come to worship him." But some people say that that's a farce and it's a cover-up and they're actually a satanic cult and blah blah blah. So there's a whole bunch of stuff like that, and of course that's why I thought growing up Christians and Catholics are prohibited from joining these organizations. But that is actually not quite the truth and not quite the reality, as we're going to get into here. And it's interesting to me that growing up I never heard this, never heard of this entire concept as a whole, literally didn't even know that it was a thing until a couple of weeks ago. And I have some thoughts on why that might be, and we'll get to those later on. But basically I was having a conversation with my mom asking her if she had ever heard of the Order of the Eastern Star, and she had, and then we had a conversation, and I don't even honestly remember how this transpired, but I think I must have implied at some point during that conversation that I had always thought that we were not supposed to be members of the Freemasons because of the whole satanic thing. And she actually sent me a link to an article, and I ended up going down a rabbit hole that I was very unprepared for. As it turns out, the reason why Catholics are not supposed to join the Freemasons, according to this article and a couple of other things that I read, is that because some people believe that there is a secret plot by the Freemasons and by another secret organization known as the Italian Carbonari in Italy to infiltrate the Catholic Church and spread liberal ideas within it and basically disrupt the entire concept of Catholicism from the inside out. Now, it's interesting to me because growing up there were people that went to our church who were Freemasons. It was kind of a well-known fact because they had the rings and everything, and people kind of just turned a blind eye to it because they spent most of their time just helping out the community, doing charity work, that kind of thing. I think that's most people's general conception of what the Freemasons do. I asked Stuart about his experience with the Order of the Eastern Star because there had been a chapter in his hometown, and he said that they did most of the same similar stuff. And even though growing up Southern Baptist, his religion doesn't really view Freemasons and the OES, Order of the Eastern Star, favorably either, again, they turned a blind eye to it because everybody's just out there trying to do good and create a better community. But when I did some Googling about Catholicism and Freemasonry, a Wikipedia page popped up almost immediately about the papal ban on Freemasons, which in essence means that the Pope came out and said, hey, nobody can from joining the Freemasons, you are absolutely prohibited from being members of Freemasonry. But the funny thing about this is, at the very top of that Wikipedia page, before you even get to the article, there's a disclaimer with an exclamation point stating that there are several issues and inconsistencies within that article. And that just kind of gave me a chuckle, because the thing is, of course, Wikipedia is not an academic source. Most people know that. You can't use it if you're writing a paper, if you're in school or anything like that. Most people know that, and that's because you can go on there and write a Wikipedia page, create one for anything. You can make a Wikipedia page for yourself, and you can go in there and edit details for an existing page. And it just kind of makes me wonder who went on and made that Wikipedia page for the papal ban on Freemasonry, and what prompted Wikipedia to go, whoa, just so you know, there are many inconsistencies and issues with this article. It's just kind of funny to me that Wikipedia, the king of inconsistent sourcing, came out and said, hey, this is not a consistent source. It just seemed kind of funny to me. You can take that to mean whatever you like. But back to this whole secret plot. There is a book called The Permanent Instruction of the Alta Vendita, which was published in 1859 by Piccolo Tigre, which is an alleged pseudonym for a Jewish Freemason. And it was produced and distributed within the Italian Carbonari, which is a secret organization with strong similarities to the Freemasons. And within this Alta Vendita, it is alleged to detail a plot to infiltrate the Catholic Church and spread liberal ideas within, essentially the idea being to completely disrupt Catholicism and fundamentally change Catholic ideals, philosophy, and theology. From a Catholic perspective, this is a really big deal, because Catholics and Christians in general believe that the devil, Satan, is always at work behind the scenes trying to ruin everything, drag everyone down, and turn the world to his evil ways. And this, of course, would be another perfect example of that. Now, I have several thoughts on this whole thing, and I'm going to start getting into those now, but before I do, I want to make a couple of disclaimers just so that nobody gets their feathers ruffled, because I have a feeling that if you're watching this and you are a steadfast Catholic, what I'm about to say could kind of offend you a little bit. And my intent is not to offend anyone or hurt anyone's feelings. I am simply trying to encourage people to think outside the box a little bit and think for themselves, because I think it's really important, especially when you're talking about something like this. So in general, going forward, when I talk about the Catholic Church, I am not talking about people like you or your family or my parents, good people who go to church on Sunday and try to live a good life. I'm talking about big Catholic Church. I'm talking about Rome and the papacy and cardinals and bishops and the people who are deciding where money goes and what decisions are made, and let's be real, what information to cover up and who knows what when. And then also, I want to make sure that you understand that I believe that this could happen in any religion, and I think that it probably does. I think it's a fundamental issue with organized religion in general, especially the big name religions like Catholicism or Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, any of those. This could potentially be a problem. But in this instance, of course, we're talking about the Catholic Church, but I don't want to make it seem like I'm singling out the Catholic Church. This just happens to be something that I found out about by virtue of the fact that my family is Catholic and my mom told me about this, and it seemed really interesting to me, and then I started to notice some things and I thought it deserved to be talked about. But again, this could happen in any religion. It just so happens in this instance we're talking about the Catholic Church. The first thing that I think you have to consider is whether or not something like this could be true to begin with. So on the one hand, let's pretend that it is true. There is an organization or a secret group with a plot, a plan to try to disrupt the Catholic Church and change Catholic theology and the Catholic concept as a whole. Honestly, it's not too terribly hard to believe. The Catholic Church has a very long storied history of making enemies and in general just pissing people off, and they've been very steadfast and, dare I say, stubborn in what they stand for and what they believe, and they haven't really swayed on anything, no matter how controversial it may be. Not only that, but for better or for worse, and in this case I generally have to say for worse, the Catholic Church has at times done some real harm and really ruined people's lives. So imagining the possibility that there is an organization that would like to see Catholicism cease to exist or fundamentally change to the point where it is no longer recognizable isn't completely insane. Plenty of people dislike the Catholic Church and would like to see it disappear. The other side of this is questioning whether or not something like this could even be valid. And when I was doing some research about the Alta Vendita, looking at these articles, most of which were written by Catholic sources, I had some red flags popping up for me, and I think that those deserve to be recognized and discussed. I just have to wonder if this Alta Vendita is a reality, is an actual plot, or if there's a possibility that it is a cooked up get out of jail free card that the Catholic Church created, similar to saying, oh, the devil made me do it. We live in a very progressive society. Western civilization is becoming much more globalized than it ever has been before. People's perceptions and opinions of the world are being influenced by a lot more than they used to be. Social media is connecting people across a far broader range than it ever has in the past. And with that comes an influx of information being spread much more rapidly than ever before. This can be a good thing and it could be a bad thing depending on where you fall. And for the Catholic Church, I think in a lot of regards it's been a bad thing, because the Catholic Church has lost the ability to control and create the narrative that it might like to, because of the fact that information is being released so quickly, people are talking, and social media, news media, makes it a lot easier for information to get out to people a lot quicker. When you have that kind of scenario, it can be a lot harder to control the flood or control the fire, as it were, and keep information that you might not want everyone to know from leaking out into the public. And I think if we look back on the couple most recent scandals within the Catholic Church, it's pretty clear that that's almost exactly what happened. So how convenient would it be to be able to blame anything that goes wrong or any idea that someone doesn't like on a secret organization? If a concept or idea or proposal is placed before a church official that they don't like or that they think is harmful or dangerous, or if something comes to light that is particularly damning from within the Catholic Church, how easy would it be to just say, oh, it's that secret society, it's that Carbonari, it's that Alta Vendita trying to tear us apart from within? How easy is it to say that rather than saying, we've got some serious issues within our infrastructure, within our ranks that we need to address that hasn't been getting addressed and that has been getting progressively worse. Am I saying that the Catholic Church cooked up this idea of the Alta Vendita? Well, I'm not saying that. I think it's interesting that I never had heard of the Alta Vendita or the Italian Carbonari until here just recently. It seems to me that if there were a secret organization, which very clearly is not that secret, trying to ruin everything for Catholics around the world, people would be talking about it a little bit more than they are. It's a little bit tricky to find anything substantial on the internet about the Italian Carbonari or the Alta Vendita. I'm talking about articles, news sources, videos, anything like that, any kind of media. The media that I did find came from religious sources or religious news media. Now, I suppose there could be a couple of reasons for this. The first is that this secret organization really was secret up until just here recently, and now their cover has been blown and everyone's now talking about it. Or the other reason could be that because this is a religious issue having to do with the Catholic Church, the only people who really care are the Catholic Church. However, I just feel like this whole situation has the trappings of a really good conspiracy theory, and I feel like more people should be talking about it and paying attention to it than they are. At the very least, there should be a decent number of tinfoil hat groupies clustered around talking about this thing, and from what I could tell, there really isn't. It's interesting to me that given the negative exposure that the Catholic Church has received in recent years, that now there is this secret organization working from the inside to try to disrupt and ruin everything the Catholic Church is working for. It just seems very convenient to me. And I know that sounds like a really shitty thing to say, and I'm sure if you're watching this and you are a Catholic, it's not a fun thing to think about, but I think it's worth considering, and I think it's something that you have to take a critical look at and try to disconnect the emotion from the facts and think about this thing objectively. And ultimately, you have to ask yourself why this even matters in the first place. Because secret plot or not, alta vendetta or not, at the end of the day, no one and nothing should be able to influence what you believe or how you practice your religion or where you fall on the spiritual spectrum. Ultimately, that should be your choice. I think it's important to remember that back in the day, Catholicism started out as a pretty grassroots radical movement. And I would be lying if I said that I didn't think that there's a good argument to be made for things kind of going back to that way. I think anytime you have a really big organization, it doesn't matter if it's a business, a corporation, or a religion, there is the potential for a lot of negative stuff to start to bleed its way in. Because let's be honest, people suck and they're very, very selfish, and ultimately there is going to be someone along the way who sees an opportunity to take advantage of people and kind of push their own agenda and try to be the top dog and come out with an advantage. And unfortunately, even though this shouldn't be the case, it is happening every single day, and it's happening in the Catholic Church as well. I'm going to be kind of keeping an eye on this whole alta vendetta thing, seeing if I see any more developments with it, seeing if I see any more information come out. If I do, or if I hear anything new, maybe that'll be fodder for another video later on down the line, because I think this is really interesting and it definitely deserves to be talked about. At the very least, even if it isn't true, even if there's nothing to it, it's a very intriguing conspiracy theory and probably the most interesting one that I have heard to date, and I thought that I had heard them all. The last point that I want to make, and again, this might be a little bit controversial, is just that another part of this whole alta vendetta thing that kind of bothers me is that if it isn't true, and if it is the Catholic Church trying to come up with a convenient way to get out of jail free and have someone to blame for their problems, then there's a potential that they could also use it as a fear-mongering tactic to get their congregation and members of the Catholic Church to do what they want. And that's just a really, really crappy thing for them to do if that's the case. Again, I don't have any proof that this is the case, that the alta vendetta is fake, that the Catholic Church cooked it up, but on the flip side of that, there isn't a ton of evidence that it is real. In my opinion, a couple of articles written by some very zealous Catholics doesn't necessarily convince me that this is something that people should be worried about. This video was actually a little bit challenging for me to make. I had tried to film it quite a few times the other day and scrapped all of the footage that I took because I realized that I was kind of pussyfooting around what I was trying to say, and I was almost afraid of coming right out and saying, hey, I think there's a good possibility that the Catholic Church made all this up. And that was a very interesting reaction to go through, and I had an almost out-of-body experience when I realized that that was what was happening. And this would be a perfect place to start getting into the bite model and religious indoctrination, but honestly, that's a video for a whole nother day. The thing is, I think there's a lot more that goes into being a member of a religious organization than following a set of rules and listening to what someone who claims that they're in charge has to say. And unfortunately for the Catholic Church, I don't think that they've always done a very good job of encouraging free thought and independent opinion. And in a case like this with the alta vendetta, assuming that this were to catch fire and really take off, that could be very damning for them and do a lot of damage, because people are going to be scared and they're going to react, and I could see this thing snowballing out of control. Religious conviction and spiritual conviction are both really good things to have and things that you should foster, but you should have them because of your own experiences and your own conviction and your own thoughts and soul searching, not because someone somewhere far away in a different continent, in a different country, is telling you that you should believe them. And that, I know, is a very, very controversial thing to say. but I don't think that I could sit here and be an honest human being and say anything else. I believe what I believe because of the experiences that I've had in my own life and my own spiritual journey. And I'm not going to lie and say that some of that hasn't taken me away from the Catholic Church, but in this case I think that that might not be such a bad thing, because it gives me a unique perspective of kind of having an outside perspective to be able to take a step back and try to look at the forest for the trees, which can be very difficult if you're really deeply steeped in something. If you are watching this and you are religious, I would just encourage you to not be afraid of being a little bit skeptical from time to time. I think that a little bit of healthy skepticism never hurt anybody, and when applied properly, it could do a lot of good and really help a lot of people. So anyway, that is the video for now. This has been the Alta Vendetta, the Italian carbonari. I'm curious if you've ever heard of it and what your thoughts on it are. I'd be very surprised if you have, but please leave a comment below if you have. Send me anything you might have on it, because I am definitely going to be keeping up to date and trying to keep a pace of this thing and see if anything else develops, if anything else comes out, and if it does, who knows, maybe I'll do another video about it. Subscribe if you haven't already, turn on the notifications so you'll know every time I post, all of that good stuff. Thank you for watching this video if you made it this far. Thumbs up, always appreciated, and I will see you again soon for the next one. Ciao.